Okay, my clock says 1:30 on the dot, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. On behalf of North Central Iowa Ag in the Classroom, we'd like to welcome you to our very first out-of-state farm chat. My name is Allison Swanson, and I'm going to be kind of leading us on our very first farm chat with out-of-state farm chat with you today. Thank you all for muting. Like I said, just a couple of other housekeeping items. Feel free to ask any questions throughout today's farm chat. You can have your teacher type in your questions in the chat box, and I'll kind of monitor those throughout the farm chat and make sure we get all of your questions answered. And thank you for all those that have already submitted some wonderful questions. And I know George is going to do a great job of getting all of those answered for you today. So without further ado, I would like to welcome you all and also introduce to you our farmer who is leading our chat today. George Sims is a citrus farmer from the state of Florida. And I know George personally because he works very closely with my husband, Jeremy, who is an agronomist here in Iowa. And we've gotten to know George over the past year or so, and he's very passionate about agriculture. And I know he's excited to show you around his citrus grove today. So I'm going to take it away, George, and we all hope you enjoy today's farm chat.
Okay, well, great, Allison, and thank you. And I really appreciate this opportunity. And like Allison said, I'm very passionate about agriculture, and I'm very passionate about helping farmers. And actually, I'm excited about training and actually sharing more information with all of you today. Allison, I'm having just I'm trying to expand my picture again so that I can actually show the map, and I'm having a little bit of an issue here.
Oh, I actually have your camera.
Yes, I'm actually trying to go to yourself and go to full screen. Okay.
If you keep touching the top icon there, you'll find the camera, or the top right hand corner. Find that. There we go.
Okay. All right. So I thought it'd be very helpful that if today I started out so that you could understand where I am in the United States. If we look at the map, I've actually highlighted Iowa in green, and I've highlighted Florida in orange. Now, this is a distance of about 1,500 miles to go from Iowa to Florida. If we were to get in a car and to drive straight through, leaving right now, we wouldn't get to Florida until this time tomorrow afternoon. It would take about 22 hours to drive from Iowa to Florida. Now, when you get down here to Florida, I want to show you that actually I am down here in the very southern part of the state. This is where the citrus is grown. Now, something that you might recognize would be Disney World. Disney World is here pretty much in the center of the peninsula of the state of Florida. But I'm down about 2 hours further south of where Disney World is. And this is where we can grow citrus. And I'll explain that in more detail. I've been growing citrus now in Florida for 37 years. I was raised in North Florida. I actually went to school like you through grade school and high school. And then I actually studied engineering in college. I didn't start out in agriculture. My family did not farm, but I found my passion about 40 years ago in that working out into the citrus groves. And you can see I've got some things here I want to show you, and we're going to share over the next half hour. Allison, let me get back to, I'm having a little bit of a, okay, so everybody can see me. All right, so now back to.
It's hard to find those icons again, so you're doing great.
Okay, well, so as I said, I was not actually trained in agriculture, and I didn't grow up on a farm, but I actually went to school. And when I got out of school, I actually went into the Navy, and I was a Navy pilot. And I actually flew jet aircraft off of aircraft carriers all around the world. That's how I started my career. And so that is a long time ago, about 40 years ago. But I came out of the Navy and I actually started building golf course communities in Florida. That was what I was trained to do. And so I was actually working as an engineer building golf course communities. And then I had an opportunity to get into citrus in 1986. Now that's a long time ago, but it's something that I found that I really enjoyed, and I enjoyed working with farmers. And over my career, we've seen a lot of changes here in Florida. Now I'd like to show you some things that are different about growing citrus in Florida than what you might be used to or understand in Iowa. I have soil here, and I wanted to show you, here is your beautiful, fluffy, black, rich, organic matter soil from Iowa. Right next to it, this is Florida sand. We don't have the luxury here in Florida of having the dark, rich soil that you have in Iowa. That's a blessing, and be very thankful for it. And of course, there are lots of differences in where we grow and the types of crops we grow. My citrus trees, my orange trees, of which there's a baby tree right here, and I'll tell you more about it soon, but these orange trees would not grow in Iowa. It gets too cold, and I know you guys have had a temperature change here just in the last week or so. In Florida right now, it's 86 degrees this afternoon. We had a little bit cooler this morning and it was in the 60s, but you can see the sun is shining. We've got a beautiful day. And this is typically a fall day in Florida, is that we will get a little cooler at night, but we do not get to freezing. We stay well above freezing, where you guys are having a lot colder temperatures in Iowa. And that's why you grow certain crops in Iowa, like corn and soybeans. We grow more tropical crops down here in Florida. So if we go back to the map real quick, one of the things that I want to point out is you can see that the landmass of Florida, where I live and where I farm, is surrounded by salt water. This is the Atlantic Ocean, and this is the Gulf of Mexico. So we're surrounded by salt water. Now that's something very different than your home state of Iowa, where you've got to go a long way to get to water. You could get to the fresh water in the Great Lakes up here, but to get to salt water, you're going to have to go either to the Gulf of Mexico, the Atlantic Ocean, or if you could go out west and go to the Pacific Ocean if you were out by California. Now I want to point that out because it's very important that one of the things that is critical to our own health, our own bodies, is this. This is water, okay? Now this is a bottle of drinking water, but this water is also critical to growing your crops in Iowa, crops anywhere, or for me growing these orange trees in Florida. Now, one of the things that has happened in my career in growing citrus is that our water has become salty. And that comes from, again, being that I'm right next to the salt water here in Florida. So we have challenges here in growing citrus in that we need fresh water, just like you do, just like our bodies do. Our trees need fresh water. And so it's very important for us to find ways to grow, and especially when we're working with beach sand and we don't have all that organic matter that you have up in Iowa. So this is a very different growing condition. We're very hot here. We also have a lot of humidity in Florida. It comes naturally because we're surrounded by water. So these are the kind of things that are important to remember when you're looking at how you would grow things in Iowa. It's going to be a lot different here in Florida. And that was one of our objectives and goals, was to share with you how crops are grown in other places so that you could have a good appreciation. There's a lot of different things in agriculture all over the world. In my career as an adult, I have actually changed my agricultural career in that I not only grow crops here in Florida, but I travel the entire United States and now into Canada, working with growers and helping them like I do in Iowa, as Allison mentioned earlier, that I work with a lot of corn and soybean growers right there in your home state. And I also work in other states in the Midwest, and then also work with other crops out in California and in other states, and then up in Canada. So my challenge has been is to continue to learn. As a grower, a farmer, we're always challenged with the weather, something that we can't control. We can't control the rain. And so we in Florida have to do different things because we don't actually get as much rain in the growing season, like in the spring and summer, as you do in Iowa. Now, one of the things that I wanted to show is that this piece of pipe, and it's actually a piece of plastic pipe, we actually have to put that underground out here in the orchard, and we then have a well that actually provides the water for my trees. We don't get enough water from rain to be able to keep these trees going year round. So right here on top of the ground, there's actually this black pipe, and this pipe, as you can see my hand lifting it up, is actually carrying the water from the well out to each tree. Now I've got a better example here I'd like to show you of a sprinkler that is used to actually water this tree. And every tree in my grove is actually hooked in to that black tube, which is connected to the well so that we can run the water to water these orange trees. Now this tree was actually grown in a nursery. It was grown in a greenhouse for about a year. Now this baby orange tree is actually what was planted here in this orchard 5 years ago. Now these trees are still growing and they're not fully grown yet. And I'll show you a mature tree soon. But this baby tree, I wanted to point out something that's very unique about orange trees. We have two parts to this tree. We have a lower part and we have the upper where you see the leaves and where the fruit will grow. This lower portion that's down in the soil actually is called a rootstock. This rootstock is a particular variety that has been grown so that it will grow again in this Florida sand. We have to actually take and we graft, and that's the way this in a nursery, this upper portion of the tree was actually grafted to this lower portion, and then up grows the tree that ultimately is going to grow the fruit. And right here, I want you to see this is young growth, and you can see more here that looks different than the leaves that are mature and been on this tree for a year. When you actually water the tree and you fertilize it, you can actually get all this new growth. Now, as this tree continues over time, it will continue to grow, and then it will become like the trees in this orchard. But this tree is about 1 year old right now when it was grown in the nursery, and then we take and we'll plant it into the orchard, and then it will grow over the next 3 to 5 years. Now, as I said, these trees are about 5 years old, and you can see that there's actually fruit on these trees. These trees don't actually start producing fruit until they're 3 to 5 years old. Now they will produce more fruit as they get older and over the years. And an orange tree, I'm sure you might wonder, how long do they live? Well, they can actually live as long as humans, but they typically have a life in a commercial orange grove of about 25 to 30 years. You can see we've got more oranges here, and these are actually a navel orange. And these trees are growing this fruit currently, and they're not quite ready yet. They'll be ready in the next 1 to 2 months. And there's different varieties in this orchard, and I'll be showing you some of the different varieties that we grow here. Now, how many trees per acre? As you look at this orchard, there is about 140 trees per acre. Now, if you remember that an acre is about 208 feet by 208 feet, and of course, out in the Midwest, you guys have thousands and thousands of acres of corn and soybeans. Now here with trees, it's a lot different, and we typically have smaller orchards. This orchard is a 40-acre orchard, and I have about 4,000 trees in this farm. Now there's different types here, as I said, and I'll be showing you some of those different varieties. And I've actually got some of the fruit that I've actually gone ahead and prepared for you. And I want to show you that here we have a tangerine, and you would be familiar with those, and these are not quite ripe yet, but I've got one here that you would probably recognize. That is a cutie. That is a baby tangerine, and they're very sweet, and they're very delicious, and they're very good for you, and they're full of vitamin C. But our Florida, this tangerine is almost ready. And the reason that it is not orange like this one that actually came from California, our fruit has to change color with temperature. And we've not gotten cold enough yet in Florida to actually start changing the color of my tangerines, even though they're very close to being ready to eat. This is a Myers lemon. This is what we'd be making lemonade with. This is a navel orange, and as you can see, it's got a lot of seeds, but it's a very juicy orange, and they're very popular over the holidays. And the last piece of fruit that I grow here is a grapefruit. And these are, I love these personally. This is probably my favorite fruit, a pink grapefruit. But again, a lot of vitamin C and a lot of healthy benefits from citrus, and they all grow on these trees here in this orchard. Now, as I go over, you can see each of those pieces of fruit on a tree. And one of the things, lemons are very prolific, and a tree will grow a lot of lemons. And you might wonder how many pieces of fruit would be on a tree. And you can see all of these lemons. There can be 500 to 600 pieces of fruit on one tree. And when we harvest these, every one of these pieces of fruit have to be picked by hand. Just like I took that off, every piece of fruit is picked by hand. We don't have machines like you do in the Midwest to pick corn and soybeans. We actually harvest all of this fruit by hand. So you can imagine that's a big task, and it takes a lot of time. Now the tangerines that I showed you, here is the actual tangerine tree, and now all the baby tangerines are here, and they're not quite ripe yet, but as we get colder over the next couple of months going into winter here in Florida, these fruit will start to change colors. As you can see here, these oranges are actually starting to turn yellow, and they will actually become more orange as soon as we get a little bit colder weather. But this gives you an idea of the variety of citrus that's grown here in Florida. And in this case, I have about 4,000 trees, and then I've got a variety here. Florida typically grows mostly oranges, as we showed earlier, and we grow these oranges to actually be orange juice. And that is predominantly what I started out growing in Florida with, was actually oranges for orange juice. But over my career, I've changed to specialty fruit. And this fruit that I've shown you today, between the grapefruit and the lemons and the oranges and the tangerines, they're becoming much more popular for, as you would find those in the grocery store, that they were picked, we wash them, we sanitize them, and then we put them in cartons, and then they're delivered to your grocery store. And that's how we do most of our fruit. The juice fruit is actually put into big trailers. They actually hold about as much fruit as one of your grain trailers would hold. Out in Iowa, 45 or 50,000 pounds of grain. We would have that same amount of oranges, and actually, from the actual count of the oranges, to give you an idea, there would be 90,000 of these oranges in that truck. They weigh about a ½ pound each. So that's how we get the actual weight that we can carry to the juice plant. And these juice plants are all over the state of Florida, and there's so many different brands, but we can send this fruit in a semi, and then they actually squeeze it and turn it into orange juice and put it in a carton for you.
George, we have a few more questions about the harvesting process, if you don't mind.
Okay.
How many people help you during harvest?
It can be from 30 or 40 to actually several hundred. It just depends on the picking crew. There's a lot of oranges here in the state. It has actually been one of the largest agricultural industries in Florida, has been growing citrus, and it's been here for about 200 years. And it's one of our most important businesses in Florida, other than tourism and having our tourist attractions here in Florida. But it actually, a crew of our workers will come in and hand pick. They will actually grow to each of the rows, and they will actually have a big, actually a sack, and they fill up this sack with oranges, and then they will dump it into a bigger container that's actually here in the grove. And then they have a machine that comes by and picks up the tub of oranges, and that tub weighs about 900 pounds. So it's very heavy, and they have a machine that can pick that up, and they'll dump it into a smaller trailer. And then when it's full, all of those oranges will then be taken to the semi trailer and loaded. To compare what you would have seen and experienced in Iowa, it'd be like the grain cart. You're filling up the grain cart as you're going through with the combine, and you're combining your corn and soybeans. We would then take that fill. When the combine's full, it dumps over into a grain cart, and then the grain cart goes to the semi and unloads. And we would be doing the same thing with these oranges. It just is oranges instead of corn or soybeans.
George, how long does it take for you to harvest all the fruit in your orchard?
In a normal situation, and of course it's always dependent on the availability of labor and workers, but it's about a 3 to 4 week process to harvest my fruit. So it takes about a month typically.
Do you have any idea how long it would take for the fruit from your trees to get to our grocery stores here in the Midwest?
I would say it would probably be about a 2 week process. It would actually go from my orchard to the packing house, and that for fresh fruit, the fruit goes to a totally different place to be prepared to send to your grocery store. They actually would wash them, they'll sanitize them, they'll put them, sort them into boxes, they size them, and then they would have to be put in some type of truck and of course moved to Iowa. And that would probably take about a week in that transit process to get it from Florida to Iowa.
Very good. When you mentioned that it needs to get a little colder in Florida for the tangerines to be turning colors, how cold does it need to get for that to happen?
We would need to have some sustained nights in the 40s and even into the upper 30s. Florida doesn't typically have a lot of very cold weather. If we do, it's kind of interesting that it happens typically at the full moon in December, January, or February. That has historically been the time that it freezes in Florida. So if you're wanting to come down to Disney World, don't come around the full moon because it's probably going to be really cold those nights. But pick a different night, not the full moon. But that historically, in my 40 years of growing citrus, that has been the common denominator, is that it gets really cold when there's a full moon around Christmas or early January, and it even can go into February. Now, we do freeze here, but it typically would only be 1 or 2 nights out of the entire winter. So we do not have very much cold weather. And that purposefully is the reason that we're down here in South Florida. As we were looking at the map earlier, this is why I'm so far south, is to get away from those cold, freezing temperatures in the winter.
Mhm. And how warm did you say it was there today?
Right now it's 86 degrees here this
Oh,
afternoon.
goodness.
I think we're
Wouldn't
probably
that
about
feel
50
nice?
degrees warmer than you.
That's a bit of a difference.
Yes, about 50 degrees probably between Iowa and
Yeah.
Florida today.
Oh my. We have a question in the chat box. Can you use the fruit that might fall off the trees onto the ground?
No, for health reasons and sanitation, we have lots of different things and animals that actually come through our orchards. I have deer here, I have raccoons, I have a lot of different animals that come through. So, for sanitation reasons, if the fruit hits the ground, we don't use it, we don't pick it up. We only hand pick and package the fruit that's still on the tree.
What other kinds of fruits and vegetables are grown in Florida?
Oh my goodness. I work with a lot of growers. I've actually myself personally grown watermelons. I've grown strawberries. We grow green beans. Actually, Florida supplies 70% of the nation's green beans in the winter. So the green beans that you have at Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner in Iowa probably came from Florida.
Very good. Thank you. Um, let's see. And you said before that prior to you buying this land for your citrus trees, that this was all a bare field before you came in and planted the trees?
Correct. We actually, this piece of property actually had a lot, as you can see in the background, oak trees and other permanent trees here on the actual piece of property. And actually, we used heavy equipment to clear out the areas that where the citrus trees are planted, and we leveled that ground. And then we put those big white plastic pipes, the irrigation pipes underground, and actually put in our irrigation system before we planted any trees. Now, one thing that's unique that you might have noticed as we were looking in the orchard, we try to keep the grass and the weeds, of course, not growing underneath the trees, because we don't want other crops to compete with the tree for nutrition. So we actually mechanically or manually take care of the grass and the weeds. Here I just actually mow it like you'd be mowing your lawn at home. The middles in between the trees is where I actually will go in and actually mow the actual orchard. If you can see here, the middles between the trees, we actually just mow that just like you would your lawn.
Do you have any insects that might affect the growth of your fruit or any other kind of pests?
Well, yes, and they're a lot more prevalent down here in Florida than you would have in Iowa. Your cold temperatures and freezing, below freezing, and below zero temperatures that I have personally experienced in January in Iowa. I saw 16 degrees below zero this past January when I was there on the thermometer, and about a 30 or 40-mile-an-hour wind to probably that kind of wind chill, 30 or 40 below zero. So we have a lot different temperatures. We're much more temperate here in Florida, as we showed on the map. I'm so much further south than Iowa, 1,500 miles, diagonally down here, but I must be probably 800 or 900 miles further south than Iowa. And that is a challenge, is that we have a lot more of a temperate climate. So we don't get that cold temperatures that you get that would actually kill off some of your bugs. We don't have that luxury here. So we have to do a lot of other, maintenance in our agronomy program to take care of the trees. We spray our trees sometimes in the summer as much as once a week. So you would never be spraying your corn or soybeans that many times in Iowa. So we have much more of a challenge here with taking care of those bugs. And we try to do it with friendlies. There's actually there's a lot of things that are natural in nature, and we try to have them take care of the some of these pests. Now, one thing I know that you might be curious about, and one thing that's important in a citrus orchard here in Florida, are bees. Bees are very important because bees actually pollinate the trees for us. Whereas in corn and soybeans, especially corn, your corn plants pollinate by wind. Wind spreads the pollen from the tassel, onto the actual corn ears on the silks, and the silks on corn pick up the pollen from the tassel, and that's typically by wind. In Florida, we have to have actual bees. These trees will bloom in the spring. In March and April of each year, the trees will actually go into full bloom and have all the bloom flowers all over the tree. And the bees that are naturally out here, and sometimes we add them in, actually artificially bring in bees to help us. But the bees are the workers in my orange grove to help me pollinate for my fruit for next year's fruit crop.
Very good. That was a question that we had, was about pollinators. So thanks for asking that. What is the length of the growing season in Florida? I know you have nice warm temperatures. So is it throughout the year, or is there a certain time of year where it's better to grow citrus?
Well, as I said, the citrus trees bloom in the spring in March and April. That then sets the fruit for the next year's fruit crop. The fruit actually will grow. Some varieties will be ready in 8 to 9 months. There's actually one of the most desirable oranges for juice is called Valencia orange. The Valencia orange actually would pollinate and set fruit in March or April, but it would not be ready until the next year's May. So it takes about 14 months to grow a Valencia orange. I would say the average probably is 10 to 12 months. Most of my fruit is actually going to bloom and set fruit in the spring, and then we'll harvest it sometime in late winter or early part of the next spring.
What's your ideal temperature for your growing season? What temperature does citrus produce the best in?
Well, it would be in a temperate, type temperature, a moderate temperature, something in the 70s, 80s, 90s. We typically don't get much above the high 90s in Florida, even in the summer, middle of summer. Because we
Mhm.
get a lot of rain in the summer, our rains come from thunderstorms, which are formed by the heat over the land in the summer, the ground heating up. When it's 95, 98 degrees here in the summer, we actually get thunderstorms, which will then provide rain for Florida. And that, of course, replenishes our water supply in the ground. And that also does water the crop during the summer. But then these oranges are trying, and citrus fruits are growing all through the winter when we don't get any rain. And that's why, as I was showing earlier, it's important to have that water system so that we can water each of these trees. There's a little sprinkler underneath every tree in the grove so that we can water them. We can also feed them the nutrition they need through that irrigation system. But in the summer, when it gets really, really hot, like in August and September, when we have our highest temperatures, actually the citrus does not grow. It does not produce. It's still there, but in essence, what's happening, it's so hot that the natural biological functions that go on in every plant in our own bodies are controlled by temperature. And when it's so hot, those biologicals are eating most of the sugar that the plant makes. And my orange trees make sugar just like your corn plants and your soybean plants do in Iowa and every other plant. Plants build sugar, and that's something that is the way nature works. And it's something that I've become very passionate about in helping growers understand that we can only control so much of what's going on out in our fields. And we can do the best job we can, but sometimes weather doesn't cooperate with us. Most of the time it does, but we do have challenges anywhere in the world in trying to grow food. And one of the things that I think is very important that we have touched on is that, like in my career, I chose to transition out of another occupation, being engineering, and I transformed into agriculture over the last 40 years, but I've continued to learn and grow. And by going all over the nation and even into other countries, I've learned a lot about agriculture that I would have never known if I'd stayed in Florida. So one of the important things I like to tell everyone is that it's all about sharing. All of us know different things, and we should continue to learn our entire life. And I do that every day. It's one of the things I think that keeps me going and makes me really happy, is that I continue to learn and I continue to share. You know, much like what you in the classrooms are learning today and learning from your teachers, is that you're learning how to learn. And that's one of the most important things I think that I can share with you, is that I found that my life has been very much enriched by continuing to learn and continuing to share with others.
That's a great message to share to our students. Thank you. Another question we had, you talked about how the fruit is harvested by hand, but what about those really hard to reach fruits? Do you use any special tools to get them out of the trees?
Well, we actually do, and the pickers have ladders, and they're actually wooden ladders typically, because they don't damage the tree as much with a wooden ladder as they would with a metal ladder. But they actually, in taller trees, and some of these trees at different points in time, orange trees have grown to 30 to 40 foot tall. Now, that is not common today. Agricultural practices have changed in my lifetime, and typically orange trees are grown today probably to 8 to 12 foot. But you could not reach the fruit in the top of the tree from the ground, so you would need a small ladder, and the pickers just actually lightly lay the ladder up against the tree. They climb up the ladder, they pull the oranges off, they put them in their cloth sack, and then they come down the ladder and they dump their sack into a bigger container actually in the middle of the grove.
Okay, thank you. Well, I can't believe we're already at 4 minutes left. So teachers, if you have
Wow.
any final questions, feel free to get those into our chat box. I wanted to ask George too, before we leave, is your family involved with your orchard?
Well, not actually with the orchard. This is something that I can take care of, myself, and I enjoy doing it. I could actually hire out, the agronomy portions and have someone else do it for me. But I enjoy the actual being out here in the orchard, and I have a regular tractor like you have on the farms there in Iowa, and I have a big tractor, and I can mow and I can actually spray the trees with my tractor. I also have a side-by-side, a Honda side-by-side four-wheeler that I can go through the orchard and do small tasks with. But then I do hire out the picking, because that is a job that would be too big for me. So on a year-round basis, I can take care of this, and but I do have a son and a son-in-law who actually work in my business, an agricultural business, but it's actually not part of this orchard. It's actually the part where I'm traveling to Iowa and working with farmers up there.
Okay. So typically, do you have a number in your head of how many pounds of fruit that you harvest each year?
Well, we could do the math, but we're actually harvesting one semi-load, which would be about 45 to 50,000 pounds per acre. And so if we multiplied that times 40 acres, then you can see
We'll have
that
them
it's,
figure that out. How about that? We'll give them a math
that's
assignment
correct.
to do.
That's a math question, yes.
So
But you,
45 to 50,000 pounds per acre, and
correct,
you have
yes.
45 acres. So
Yeah, 40 acres, yes, 40
40
acres.
acres.
Yes, and so you can imagine the big semi trucks that are hauling grain up and down the road. We would have 40 of those coming off this orchard full of oranges.
That's crazy to visualize. Just a semi full of oranges, and you have 40 of them. That's crazy. One of our last questions, I think you maybe have answered it. What is the coldest temperature that you've seen in Florida?
Well, actually, in 1989, I saw 17 degrees here where I live on a Christmas, over Christmas. It's actually Christmas Eve of 1989. It was 17 degrees here where I am. And we had a lot of citrus damage. The trees, the upper portions of the trees were damaged. The fruit was totally wiped out that year, but we were able to save the lower portion of the tree. If you remember when I showed you that there's the bud union where the tree is grafted with the variety of the fruit that I'm growing is grafted to a rootstock. Our goal was to save the rootstock because the tree will grow back, and it did grow back. It took us a couple years to recover, but that is like once in a lifetime event. We have never seen those temperatures since, and I've been you go from 1989 till now, so 34 years I've never seen those temperatures again.
Well, hopefully you never have to in your lifetime.
I hope not to.
So, well, thank you so much, George. This was wonderful, and we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to show us around your citrus grove. And it was pretty cool to see fresh fruit that you had just picked off of your trees. And I bet we would all love to just come visit you in person in
Well, that'd
Florida
be
right
great.
now.
Well,
But we
you're
would
very
like to
welcome.
remind all the teachers too that you have graciously agreed to do a follow-up session later this winter, probably after you're done harvesting the fruit. And we'll hopefully you all can join us again so we can see where George's fruit went and what it's being used for now, maybe in like the juicing process or being delivered to the grocery store. So make sure to watch for that, teachers. But everybody's saying thank you, George. I think they all
Okay.
appreciated it.
Well, great.
And we'll hope
Thank
to
you.
see
And
you
I,
again soon. Bye,
okay,
everyone.
enjoyed
Thank
it.
you.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.